Today's technology evolves with almost incomprehensible speed. Ever new, ever exciting, with endlessly fascinating stories to explore. Thus the birth of overexposure.
Travels to the Edge appears on PBS as well as some other independent networks around the country.
And 40 countries around the world.
40 countries around the world, indeed. It is certainly an engaging show, no doubt about that. Really exciting. Tell me this, when you arrive in a place, in a new place, and you're there with your equipment as a photographer, you stand out. When you arrive in a new place with a film crew, you really stand out. So, what's the difference there? What's that like? And how do you adapt with all these other people and equipment around?
I love it. I embrace all the attention. I embrace the shock of travel. I embrace all the little hurdles that we have to meet, because at the end of it, at the end of not only a day, but at the end of the trip, there's such a profound feeling of satisfaction, because there are times when we arrive and, you know, everybody in the village or that part of the country is aware of our arrival, and we create a lot of interest. I tend to instantly disarm people, whether it's eye contact and smiles, or I put my camera in the hands of the subjects who will want to photograph. I engage them on a very, very non-confrontational way, and I get them on board really quick, and I love doing that. And I don't care whether you're in the Sahara, the Amazon, or the Himalayas. People are people. Basically, that's one of the underlying themes of our TV show, is to really show the humanity of all these remote cultures. And we get them on board. They are very aware we're there, but they're very enthusiastic to interact with the crew. And the crew is small. There's 3 other people besides myself, and we're all about my size. So we're fairly innocuous.
How did you find your crew? How did you recruit them? What was that process like?
Well, we found our crew largely because in Seattle, Rick Steves, who is a well-known personality on the PBS network, his producer is married to my producer. And Rick Steves' lead cameraman is now become so we stole his crew, basically. It's a really close-knit, local group.
Art, as technology advances at a breakneck pace, it offers a lot of conveniences to the consumer. But I guess the biggest question is that sustainable?
I think it's exciting times. It's changing in the age where major stock agencies that used to represent me are struggling. You know, we're teaching more workshops, we're taking people on trips around the world. We are building and boosting our own web presence, where in the past, historically, Getty Communications would have done that. So today, in today's climate, it's changing very fast. We're changing very fast with it. We're using all the social media like Twitter and Facebook and who knows what else that arrives tomorrow. We're making alliances with other photographers and other groups, and yet we're living at exciting times where Art Wolfe can reach out to millions of people directly from my own office, which we weren't able to do before.
By the same token, you're also in many respects, a photojournalist, which means you sort of have to have an unbiased sort of MO when you arrive in a new place or photographing new subjects.
You have to have a passion behind whatever you're shooting. Honestly, if you are just shooting a photo because it's there, you might as well not take the picture. So I think you've got to have a strong interest, a strong connection, a passion towards the subject. And I try to elicit the emotions out of a subject, if it's the story or part of the story. If it's a landscape that's at risk, I try to find the essence of that landscape and really make it, capture it in a way that it impacts the emotions of the people that will ultimately look at it. And with nature conservation, we support virtually every organization that you could think of. In the next 5 minutes, we will have supported them with photos for their campaigns. And it's a broadening spectrum, because we're much more involved now with cultures at risk, the cultures that are changing, and we're providing photos for all sorts of organizations with that ilk as well.
Talk to me a little bit about how you're an activist and how that work translates into, say, wanting to make a more sustainable planet for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's twofold. If Art Wolfe the photographer is just going out there by himself. In many ways, I know I'm recording cultures that will inevitably change with westernization. Whether I'm there or not, it's going to happen. And so there's a value to having recorded, and many of my photos are historic. You know, if you go to Lhasa, Tibet now, the Potala Palace, which is the heart of the Buddhist culture in Tibet, it used to stand out amongst, you know, cattle pastures, and today it's surrounded by Chinese-looking buildings. So those photos of the Potala Palace are archival and historic, and there's a value to that. And there's a sense of urgency as I travel into remote areas to document a culture, the tradition, so there is a record of what was once. To a greater extent, when we bring the TV crew, everybody knows that we're not to leave anything behind, that if there was a group of people or anthropologists that would follow in our footsteps, they would not see anything that we would leave behind. There wouldn't be any little gifts like pencils or baseball caps or jerseys or any of that. What we tend to do as offerings to the remote cultures is to bring in the food that they would normally be living off of.
What are your thoughts on the BP oil spill? Would you cover it as a photojournalist? And what do you say about it as a conservationist?
I do know that when I think of that spill, I think of the visual image that I saw that's still cemented in my mind, which is an aerial shot over a boat surrounded by almost beautiful patterns of the oil. And so it's a dangerous beauty that I saw, but it was a visual image rather than any spoken word that I still connect with that. That's one of the reasons that I've worked with a lot of these environmental groups, because one photo could be the center of any campaign to save this environment or that environment. And they know that, they recognize that, and we gladly provide those photos free of charge because we believe in what they're doing. I think that the Gulf will eventually heal over. I think that the mix of currents will start to break down the oil. I think the biggest challenge will be the reeds and the marshes along the coast, because that's not an easy cleanup.
You're also an urban humanitarian, if you will. I'm curious to know a little bit about what you do with some of the inner city kids here in Seattle. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I live on a wooded ravine overlooking Puget Sound, and like many cities up and down the coast and across America, we're under assault by introduced species of plants. English ivy and clematis, and if you're on the East Coast, it's kudzu, and there's a litany of plants that am not even aware of. But these invasive plants change environments. Worked with some teachers on getting high schoolers, junior high students, and grade school students, virtually 200 of them, and they spent several days in this wooded ravine clearing the introduced species, the invasive species, replanting the natural vegetation of the Northwest, and they also documented it. We had Wangari, who's this Nobel Peace Prize lady from Kenya, who was given the Peace Prize simply because she planted 2 million trees in Kenya and restored forests and environments. She was coming to Seattle to give a speech at our largest lecture hall in Seattle, and she came out to the wooded ravine when all those kids were out there, and she helped plant the trees, which was a great thing. So I love things that happen, and they always seem to happen for a reason, and the timing was perfect.
Give me an example of an experience that was deeply personal.
The rhino story is something that people always want to hear about, and I wear it as a badge of stupidity as opposed to honor to have survived this rhino attack. I was working on a book on the most iconic animals worldwide in each and every ecological zone. It was called The Living Wild. And I went after the largest subspecies of rhino, which happens to live in India and Nepal, and on foot in the forest with my assistant and 2 guides, and we were attacked by the rhino and its calf. And for 5 minutes we were pinned down at the base of a tree by these charging rhinos, and the only thing that saved our lives was the type of tree it was. It was a fig tree which had these buttressed roots above the ground, and those roots acted like little fences that thwarted the attack. And so that's always going to be memorable, because I was moving fast and furious, traveling around the world, and I did have time to study each and every animal's behavior and history. And I didn't know that this was once the former hunting ground of the King of Nepal, and that these rhinos have a long-term memory, and they associate man on foot as danger, and their means of defense is to attack. And so had I known all that, I probably would have been on elephant back, which was available to me. But I chose to get on the ground and to photograph up a big rhino as opposed to look down on it. Memorable moments with people. There's virtually every trip I've been on, there's really strong connections with people. And I don't know that I can single out any particular one, which I think speaks volumes for how wonderful world travel is. I've had a great time, and in many ways, I view photography as pure communication. But I love taking people along, and that's to a greater extent why the TV show exists. I love people to come along, look over my shoulder, experience the culture, experience the moment as I'm experiencing it.
To the layperson, why is it important to travel? Why should people care?
People travel, and they have culture shock, and they experience sights, smells, sounds that they've never seen before. That's a great thing for one's life.
Exciting stuff indeed. I've been speaking with artist, photographer, conservationist, and humanitarian Art Wolfe. Catch his series, Travels to the Edge, on PBS stations across the US and in 40 countries. You can also look for him online at artwolfphotography.com. I'm John Fenoglio for Overexposure TV.